Hello and welcome to another Tippling Philosopher video. Today I'm going to talk about the Kalam Cosmological Argument as it pertains to libertarian free will and feature an argument that is included in my book, Did God Create the Universe from Nothing? Countering William Lane Craig's Kalam Cosmological Argument. Fantastic book, really loved writing this book because the Kalam was something I was obsessively sort of thinking about for quite a long period of time, and so put my thoughts into that book. And so here it is, really. I'll remind you first of what the Kalam Cosmological Argument is. A very simple syllogism. Everything which begins to exist has a cause for its existence. The universe began to exist, therefore the universe had a cause for its existence. So essentially the argument implies, by assertion, that you cannot have ex nihilo creation, that an event cannot be created out of nothing. Only God, it supposes, can do this. And thus the universe created out of nothing, arguably, was created ex nihilo by God. The causal chain goes back and back to the Big Bang and stops. How can this be explained? Well, since causality must continue regressing backwards, if there is a beginning to causality, it can only be explained by God, supposedly. However, the theist is usually, if not a Calvinist, and Calvinists believe or don't believe in free will and that everything is determined by God. But if you're not a Calvinist, then any other Christian is an adherent to the notion of libertarian free will. By this, I mean that they believe an agent could make free choices, could have done otherwise. This implies that the agent is the originator of a freely willed decision, and that's an important term. So the agent is an originator of a freely willed decision or the causal chain in a decision. So the determinist, on the other hand, believes that every effect has a cause and that cause is itself an effect or a prior cause, and this goes back to the Big Bang or similar starting point where physics breaks down or some other situation. So you could have quantum cosmological physics or something else whereby the universe is explained in a different manner. So we could have a cyclical universe, we could have it with a big bounce and a big crunch, or we could have some, as I say, loop quantum cosmology. That's not relevant as to what the alternative theories could be for the theist or for the atheist or for the naturalist. But basically someone who is a determinist or adequate determinist, given sort of quantum at micro levels, we go back and back and back and back, and you know we reach something like the Big Bang or whatever else. It's not important. The point is that the denier of libertarian free will, the determinist, claims that the agent is themselves part of a larger causal chain, which explains why the agent did what they did, that the reasons were derived from what is known as the causal circumstance, the snapshot of the universe at the prior moment to that event. Back to the theist, though, they generally believe that the causal chain starts with the agent, that the agent, originates the causal chain. This allows them ownership over the decision, so that the reason for the decision cannot be further deferred to other causes. But this means that the agent is creating something out of nothing. There is an ex nihilo creation, since no prior reason can be given to explain the agent's decision, otherwise we return to determinism. But allowing for ex nihilo creation defies the opening premise of the Kalam Cosmological Argument, or KCA. William Lane Craig is always espousing the intuitive truth of the metaphysical claim that ex nihilo nihil fit, or out of nothing, nothing is made, but the theist is pretty much always an adherent of the Kalam Cosmological Argument and libertarian free will. So it's very difficult to explain how, with the Kalam Cosmological Argument, God can be the only prime mover, right? The only first cause. And yet, in a freely willed decision, the agent, the human being, is supposedly the prime mover of that causal chain from which that decision starts. So it's very difficult to explain how a libertarian, freely willed decision can make any sense without having any determining factors. It looks a bit like random. If a decision is made with no recourse to any determining factors before the decision, then the only way of making sense of that is that the decision is random. As soon as you start getting causal variables acting in that causal circumstance, we start having determinism and that decision being determined. Now, what might be some potential objections to this? Number one, the prior causes merely influence but do not define the decision. So something like an 80-20 scenario. So a decision might be 80% determined, but 20% still might be down to the agent. Secondly, an objection could be that the agent is itself a cause, and that is fine. For example, there is a theory of agent causation, supposing that agents are different to events and event causation. People can somehow ground causal chains and decisions in a way that is different to, say, a boulder rolling down a hill, hitting a tree and a pine cone falling out. That kind of causality has no agent. So often you see this move of trying to differentiate between two types of causation here. So number one can be answered very simply by what I call the 80-20 problem. And the fact is, what you're doing is you're saying 80% of a decision is cause, but 20% is still down to the agent. But that 20%, all you're doing is distilling the whole free will problem down to a smaller 20%. You've still got the issue of what is determining the agent to make that overriding choice, that 20% that overrides like these determining variables. So you could say that I can make a decision to either make a cup of tea or not make a cup of tea. And all the variables acting on me and influencing me 80% to make the cup of tea, but my agency could overcome those influencing variables. I might have 20% agency that can just overcome that somehow. But then what is causing me to be the sort of person that overcomes those 80% of variables determining variables? And we get back to, well, either it looks random or there's something to do with me, some kind of determining variables that make me the sort of person that would overcome the 80%. So all you're doing is you're just getting back to the same free will problem of causal variables and a causal chain and distilling it into 20% of that decision rather than the whole 100% of the decision. It doesn't get you out of jail at all. So the influence not causing is not a decent objection. As for agent causation is different from event causation, I think it's a non-starter. So as far as I'm concerned, it doesn't work. Agent causation is a theory developed by people like Roderick Chisholm sort of 50 years ago or so, and I'm not sure that many people really adhere to it properly. It seems there is no good reason for asserting that agents are causally different to standard events. One can appeal to some kind of dualism, but causality is a metaphysical concept, and dualistic substances need to adhere to it in the same way that matter does too. That's to say that you can't just say, an agent is not a set of events. I mean, so the naturalist or physicalist might say that as an agent we are deciding to do something, but there are events going on in our brains, and there are brain events that lead to decisions, and those brain events are part of the nature of reality and the physical aspects of the universe. You know, the brain then is victim to causal determinism, and it might be that the mental supervenes on the brain is dependent on the brain, So the mental world is dependent on the physical world, and if the physical world works to the laws of nature and physics and biology, then so does the mental world. But if you're going to say, okay, well, I believe in the soul or some kind of dualistic thing, state of affairs where the mental world doesn't depend on the brain, then you have this weird scenario how can a non-physical being interact with the physical world, or entity, a non-physical entity interact with the physical world, and then all the problems of dualism that you have, I just don't think that works to get you out of jail when considering causality, which is itself, as I say, a metaphysical concept and not dependent on physical things. I just think that merely supposing an agent can be sufficient explanation for the cause of a decision is particularly question begging. So without causal reasons, a decision grounded in no reason other than the agent, the soul, mental entity, is synonymous with random. Brain events, genetics and biology, we know cause events and cause agents to make the decisions that they do. I mean, that's psychology, that's social science. Mixed with the environment, you have a causal circumstance and you have determinism. We know, for example, that in the Benjamin Libet style experiments, where we can observe that the brain kicks into gear before the conscious brain decides to press the button, we can actually ask the subject to press a left or right button and send transcortical stimulation, magnetic stimulation, into the brain and make the agent either choose left or right. So we can determine a choice that the agent makes with some magnetic stimulation into the brain. And do that depending on where we send it, we can get different outcomes. So the agent then assigns their own agency afterwards, claiming that they freely chose left or right. So no, the agent cannot be asserted as an entity able to start a causal chain, because this assumes that a causal reason is given for a causal chain, but in a causal vacuum, right? So you can't just say, you have this causal chain going back to the agents, but there's a causal vacuum that the agent operates in, which means you can't have determinism back from there. It's just this causal vacuum that is the agent just is nonsensical, or it's random. There is no middle ground there. Which means that the adherents of the Kalam Cosmological Argument cannot consistently and coherently be an adherent of libertarian free will, because they say the only sort of prime mover that has this ability to start a causal chain is God. So then theists are logically inconsistent. Paul Russell states in Freedom and Moral Sentiment, 1995, page 14, the well-known dilemma of determinism. One horn of this dilemma is the argument that if an action was caused or necessitated, then it could not have been done freely, and hence the agent is not responsible for it. The other horn is the argument that if the action was not caused, then it is inexplicable and random, and thus it cannot be attributed to the agent, and hence again the agent cannot be responsible for it. In other words, if our actions are caused, then we cannot be responsible for them. If they are not caused, we cannot be responsible for them. Whether we affirm or deny necessity and determinism, it is impossible to make any coherent sense of moral freedom and responsibility. And that really goes to the heart of the issue here. So in this that problem is called the dilemma of determinism. And it requires something a little special if the theist wants to bypass issues raised by the Kalam Cosmological Argument in order to solve it. So I really, really believe that libertarian free will, which is this notion that an agent is a prime mover in a causal chain, so a human being is a prime mover in a causal chain that allows him to make a freely willed decision that isn't then caused by antecedent events or causation. It's completely at odds with the Kalam Cosmological Argument that says basically the Kalam says that the universe is determined apart from God at the beginning. So there you go. There's my. I will do probably another video on this topic, but you cannot be a theist who believes in the Kalam Cosmological Argument and also a theist who believes in libertarian free will. Those two are just not compatible. As ever, check out my blog, like and subscribe to, well, like this video and subscribe to my channel, and drop by any videos I do in the future. Thank you for your support.